It's Friday Coffee with your mortgage man, Eric. And today we're going to talk about assumable loans. Yes, the hot topic of assumable loans, and has been for the last 2.5 years because of the obvious high rate environment that we've had, with rates being anywhere from between 6 to 8% for the last 2.5 years. So you can assume somebody else's loan. The seller selling their home, their mortgage, their rate is at 3%, 2.5%, 2.75%, 3.25%, right? You get it. So you may have the opportunity to assume their loan, much lower payments, right, than taking the current market rate. Very entertaining and advantageous if a buyer could qualify for such a thing. So I'm going to dive into it a little bit deeper, some of the misunderstandings that they have, and some of the things that have to happen with the assumable loan, right? Assumable loan, you are assuming you are getting the seller's loan, assuming their loan. Usually happens with VA, FHA, or USDA, and I would say probably vastly, majority of the time, ends up being a VA loan that can be assumed. Now, one of the biggest misunderstandings, people are like, oh, well, you've got to be a veteran to assume another VA loan, and that's not true. You can be a non-veteran to assume the seller's VA loan. We know that, anecdotally speaking, with some of the ones that we've witnessed at our office. Now you're like, well, how are you involved with that, Eric? Because it goes through the loan servicer. Well, here's how. Borrower comes to us, we pre-approve them, we work with them sometimes for months to get them pre-approved. And then they're out looking for a home, see a home they like, and you can qualify for the assumable loan on this home. They love the home, they want the low rate. We then lose the loan. We don't get paid anything for working with them for months, unfortunately, right? Been in the industry long enough to know that happens occasionally. It sucks, but is what it is. So that's where we stay in tune with the process, because we've seen probably well over half of them go south, right? And why could they go south or sideways? Here's why, right? One is whatever the balance is over there on the seller's current mortgage, like the buyer's got to come in with that down payment percentage. So, for example, let's say the home is for sale for $500,000 and the seller's mortgage balance is $250,000. Well, that means the buyer's got to come in with $250,000. So those assets, those numbers got to match up perfectly, and sometimes they just don't, right? Sometimes the buyer doesn't have that kind of money to throw around. That's the first thing. Second thing is the time frame, the duration of time that an assumable mortgage is going to take. Most of the time, and you can Google this as well, it's 45 to 60 days. I'm sure there's somebody out there right now who says, Eric, we got one done in 27 days. Well, good. Kudos to you. I'm sure there's somebody out there that has. The vast majority don't work like that. It takes quite a bit of some time. So, and the premise here is just to be upfront with the buyer and the seller, right? Be upfront. I find the more upfront you are about some of the pitfalls, the potential pitfalls, the more smoother the transaction is going to be when you're upfront with people. So you prepare the buyer and the seller. Hey, look, this is the average time to do these is 45 to 60 days, right? Depending on the loan servicer that we've got to go through, Chase, Ocwen, Mr. Cooper, PHH, right? They each are going to have their own servicing turn times. One might be quicker than the other. One might have more educated people working in that so-called department than the other. I've seen some things happen, some horror stories, if you will, that it's not been a pretty transaction, right? It hasn't been great process to go through. It's been very frustrating process for the majority of them to go through. But, they'll go through it, right? For a rate of 3% opposed to 7%, right? Of course you would. So, they bite their tongue, grit their teeth, they go through it. So prepare them that they may experience some difficulty with the communication factors and the level of expertise or lack thereof when dealing with these servicing companies, right? Now, you have to understand this. The servicing companies, this isn't a moneymaker for them. They're not making any profit. They do them because they're forced to do them by federal law. So they have to provide the service for assumable loans. And they still have to be underwritten because of the ability to repay. That's a federal policy. So if you're conducting a mortgage transaction, you have to provide the ability to repay, which means it's being underwritten. W-2s, pay stubs, tax returns, or pension statements, whatever it is, have to be retrieved, reviewed, right? All of that has to happen still. And then we've seen two at our office where they have been at the end of their process, near 60 days into the assumable mortgage process. And the servicer sells the servicing rights to their mortgage. And the buyer's got to start the process all over again. Very frustrating. Now you need another extension to the close of escrow. Now the buyer's going to be willing to go through this again, maybe. And again, it's a bit of a painful process. Depending on what servicer you're dealing with, it can be more painful than another, right? We just discussed that. So keep that in mind. If you guys remember the loan mod days and the short sale days, very similar, right? The servicers were forced to do it by federal rule and federal policy to keep people in their homes, right? And not going into foreclosure. What happened with that is there were so many people that needed a loan mod and or short sale, and there were so few people in these institutions being able to work on them because they're not money makers, right? They don't make the company profit. They're being directed by federal rule to provide the service. So the level of service then, is hindered. It is subpar level of service. And back then, they could take months and months to get a loan mod or a short sale approved. So if anybody remembers that era, this is kind of somewhat similar when somebody's going into that gauntlet of assuming somebody's loan, okay? So just keep that in mind. Hopefully, this spells out a little bit more about what an assumable loan is, what it takes, and in my opinion, why so few people end up really going down that road. Now, look, I get it. I know there's probably a branch out there, a real estate brokerage that specializes in it or something, right, that have done more than me, and I get that. But if we're honest about it, I would say that there's nobody out there that's a true expert at it because it is such a seasonal offering, if you will. Rates come back down, the assumable loans are really non-existent then at that point because there's no benefit to them if the rates come back down, right? So you see what I'm saying? And all we could really go off of is anecdotally what we've experienced personally with assumable loans, what my office that I manage has experienced, and the realtors that I do business with, what they've experienced, right? The level of frustrations and the wait times and the number of extensions to the close of escrow, right? Things like that can happen. Anyhow, that's the assumable loan. It's Friday Coffee, the Mortgage Man Eric. 602-757-2171. We'll see you.